Okay, mine just told me recording was in progress. Okay. Common installation related violations. Daisy chaining, that's attaching one power strip onto the end of another power strip. Basically, it's going to give you the problem of overloading. You've already got a lot of power strips, anywhere from 4 to 8 connections, which can make it pretty simple to overload one even without daisy chaining. Improper routing. If you run the cords through walls, floors, ceilings, doors, windows, any of that, that's prohibited with any kind of soft power cord. Overloading. Power strips are designed to be used with several low amperage loads, like desktop computers, peripherals, that type of stuff. Should never be connected to high amperage loads like refrigerators, space heaters, microwaves, air conditioners, that type of stuff. When we get into the healthcare, we're looking at motorized equipments. So your power beds, your power chairs, that type of stuff. Improper mounting. Power strips cannot be mounted with Velcro, double-sided tape, zip ties, bungee cords, duct tape, that type of stuff. Improper plug connection. Power strip cord and device cords must not be hanging out of the receptacle. Power strips devices must not be suspended by the power cord, causing tension on the cord. Comments continued on. Signs of thermal distress. Power strips, plugs, cords that are hot to the touch, melted, burned, frayed, scorched, or discolored are unacceptable. You can also note on a power cord, if it's drawing too much heat, you'll see that it looks like it's starting to wind up, to twist the cords and the wires inside of the cord. That is an indicator that there's too much heat, too much power being drawn on that cord. Signs of damage or neglect. Power strip, cord, and components should not be dirty, stained, crushed, cut, broken, kinked, warped, knotted, twisted, loose, frayed, or otherwise damaged. Many times my inspectors have sent me photos of power strips, and you'll have the plug at the wall, and then the sheeting right beyond the plug will be pulled back, and it'll expose the wires inside of there. That's an unacceptable condition for that power strip, and it should be taken out of service. Improper environmental conditions. It must not be installed in a moist environment or location with excessive heat or limited air circulation. Improper grounding. Power strip must not have its grounding pin or wire removed or be connected to an adapter that defeats the grounding. You don't want to have tripping hazards. Should not be installed in a location where it may impede safe movement of patients and staff. So if you've got it run across the floor and beyond the bed, someone's liable to trip over it. Okay, what that crunching is, John. Improper application. So the power strips, they need to be used for what they were designed for and approved for. So you wouldn't want to use a 1449 or 1363 rated power strip inside the patient care facility. And we're going to go over that a little more here. Okay. This is the K920 tag from 2567 for healthcare facilities. And it pretty well lines out the requirements for the power strips. Those power cords, extension cords, strips in the patient care vicinity are only used for components of movable patient care equipment, electrical PCRE equipment, Can I move this bar? There we go. Now I gotta move back. That have been assembled by qualified personnel and meet the conditions of 10236. Power strips in the patient care vicinity may not be used for non-PCRE. For example, personal electronics, except in long-term care resident rooms that do not use PCRE. Power strip PCRE must have to meet UL 1363A or UL 60601-1. Power strip for non-PCRE in the patient care rooms outside of the patient care vicinity have to meet UL 1363. In non-patient care rooms, power strips can meet other UL standards, which would be 1449. All power strips are used with general precautions. Extension cords are not used as a substitute for fixed wiring of a structure. And extension cords used temporarily are removed immediately upon completion of the purpose for which it was installed and meets the conditions of 1024, 10236 of NFPA 99. And John, I see things popping up, but I can't read them. So you'll have to let me know what it is, if there's anything I need to discuss.
No, that's fine. It's just people talking, trying to get somebody to mute their microphone.
Okay. Okay, it's important to understand that there are not a single type of healthcare power strip that is suitable for every application in your facility. Each category of healthcare power strips has a specific purpose and should not be used for a different purpose that is not designed and approved for. Healthcare power strips, including surge protectors, can be divided into 4 primary application groups that use different technologies and meet varying UL standards. They can also be divided into medical grade power strips, being the power strips that meet the requirements for medical equipment and those that do not. Medical grade power strips meet UL 60601-1 or UL 1363A, and they can be used in the patient care vicinity. Power strips that do not meet these requirements cannot be used in that in a care vicinity. Patient care vicinity is a space within a location intended for the examination and treatment of patients extending 6 feet beyond the normal location of the bed, chair, table, treadmill, or other device supplied to the patient during examination and treatment and extending vertically to 7 foot 6 inches above the floor. So I put in a drawing basically of your patient care vicinity. If you note the bed, 6 feet on either side, 6 feet to the end. Other typical spaces would be in, let's say, physical therapy area, a treadmill, a table, that type of thing. Same distance from that care area is going to be considered patient care area. Okay, so before we go into these, and if you look in the white papers, it's going to kind of explain the history of power strips. It started out 1363s were considered, they were developed to be medical grade power strips. In about 1990, around 2000, they decided that, okay, those don't meet the requirements for medical care area, the care vicinity. So they came up with the 60601-1. And then about 2010, that's when they decided, well, we need power strips that can be on movable equipment. So that's where the 1363A came from. So when we start talking about them, the first one's the UL 60601-1. It's approved for use in the patient care vicinity. It can be used inside or outside of the care vicinity. It's to protect patients and staff in the event of a single fault. Includes splash resistant receptacle covers that require tool for access to prevent use of the receptacles by unqualified personnel. Includes hospital grade plug-in receptacles. And they typically power medical or computer equipment. And there is an example of your 60601-1, you know, the covers on for the receptacles and that type of stuff. We look at the 1363A, also approved for use in patient care vicinity. It can be used inside or outside of the vicinity. It requires permanent mounting, not removable without a tool. Remember, the rest of them says that they can't be mounted where it requires a tool. This one says it requires permanent mounting with a tool. And it's used for mobile medical equipment platforms such as IV poles, crash carts, that type of stuff. This one requires dual breakers, and it also includes hospital grade plug-in receptacles. And there is an example of your UL 1363A. You'll note the dual breakers on it. The next thing we have is the UL 1363. These are still at one time they were used medical grade, so they may have medical grade plugs on them, okay? They can be used in the resident room, but not within 6 feet of the resident care in that vicinity. So they're tested to comply with UL 1363, not to be used for patient care related electrical equipment. They cannot be used in the patient care vicinity. They include hospital grade plug-in receptacles. And the sum of the ampacity of all appliances connected to the receptacle shall not exceed 75% of the ampacity of the flexible cord supplying the receptacles. So that's a requirement on all your power strips in here. So if you're looking at a 15 amp power strip, you're looking at 11.25 amps is your 75%. Some of your items will come in, it will show it in wattage. Okay, 1800 watts is the same as 15 amps. So you're looking at 75%, you're looking at about 1350 watts. It's not difficult to calculate watts to amps, that type of stuff. If it tells me I have 1800 watts, I divide that by 120, which is my voltage, which gives me my amperage. There's your example of your 1363. You'll see that they still have the green dot on them. But they also state that they're not to be used in the patient care vicinity. So we'll talk about mechanical equipment. Says no mechanical equipment can be plugged into a power strip, including electronic beds, lift chairs, and in most cases, oxygen concentrators. Through checking, I haven't found any company that says their oxygen concentrator is going to allow them to be on a power strip. The reason for the beds, chairs, that type of stuff is because the motor on them or anything with the compressor draws enough of an amperage that they should be direct plugged. Additionally, no electrical equipment may be plugged into a power strip where the manufacturer's recommendation states the power cord plug is to be plugged into a fully functioning AC wall outlet. I put an example in here. This is a photo one of my surveyors sent to me off the back of a oxygen concentrator. And you'll see here that it states, and here's for the 120 volt unit. 230 tells them that they have to plug it directly into a fully functioning AC wall outlet. The 120 states the plug on the drive oxygen concentrator has one blade wider than the other to reduce the risk of electric shock. This plug is intended to fit in a wall outlet. Only one way. Do not attempt to defeat this safety feature. You know, I understand that the power strips also have the same type of plug, but it actually, we did talk to this company and they said, no, it is intended when it states that it is to be plugged into a wall outlet. Surge protectors for administrative areas. So they're not approved for use in the patient care vicinity. They're tested to comply with UL 1449. They cannot be used in the patient care vicinity at all. Provide surge protection for connected equipment. They may include hospital grade plugs and receptacles. Your 1449s or for, let's say, your administrative office, that type of stuff where you don't have any patient care areas, no resident rooms. So that's a time when you can use the more common 1449s, which are not nearly expensive as the other types. We got any questions so far, John?
No, nothing so far.
Okay. And there's your example of your UL 1449. Okay. So when we talk about a room that could be designated as non-patient care, so there's no PCREE at all, that's going to be pretty rare in a skilled nursing facility. There are some facilities that may have skilled nursing, assisted living in the same facility without 2-hour separation. It would not be difficult for someone to have a room that's an assisted living room that could be designated as a non-care. Now, of course, if you go in there and there's an oxygen concentrator in there and we're using PCRE, it's, you know, you can't real hardly designate that as a non-patient care area. But if you have a room that is absolutely no PCRE, and when we talk about PCRE, it's not only oxygen concentrators, we're talking about blood pressure monitors, heart monitors, vacs, that type of stuff. That's all PCRE, right? So anything that goes on in a room, you know, lift chairs are considered PCRE if it's needed to get that patient up. Mechanical beds, PCRE. And again, those must be connected directly to your power supply. So I kind of left a lot of room here for questions and answers. If anybody has anything.
We have had a couple come in, Randy. First one is, what kind of power strip should be used in a health department?
In a health department?
That's what yes.
Okay, if this is just like your county health department, and this is a business occupancy, it depends upon what your occupancy is going to be classified as. You know, if you're an I2 or I1 type of occupancy, you may want to look into the medical grade power strips. But if you're a business occupancy, okay, a 1449 could be used there. Now, if you're talking about a healthcare area where you're actually examining people and have that risk of a patient being shocked by equipment being monitored, then okay, I would go with a medical grade power strip.
Okay.
Did that answer the question?
Sounds like it did to me.
Okay. So just remember, if it's portable equipment on a stand, a crash cart, that type of stuff is 1363A. If it's equipment that's PCRE that is sitting in that area, care area, then it's the 60601-1.
Okay, I've got a couple of 1449 questions.
Okay.
One says, is 1449 the base standard if it is UL listed? Almost none of them have 1449 stamped on the strip. It's just on the package when we buy them. And there's kind of a follow-up that's also related. What can be used at a nurse's station is 1449 acceptable? I
If
guess
there's, okay, so we'll start with the 1449 question. Yeah,
Right.
1449 is going to be on the package probably if it's UL listed for 1449. It may not state that. 1363s are also 1449 listed. Relocatable power taps. When they started building these for the 1449 requirement was for surge protection. So basically when you were buying your power strip, unless you were buying one that's not UL listed correctly, if you're buying a knockoff, we'll say, you're probably going to be buying a 1449 because those are designed for those power surges. And then the additional medical grade power strips, they actually cover more than just a power surge. They actually protect you also from ground issues, ground fault issues, that type of stuff. That's why they require the medical grade. So yeah, it may not say it on it, but if it says it on a package that it's UL 1449 and it shows UL listed on the back, it may not say 1449. It may be a 1363. Well, it's also UL 1449. The other question is about as far as the nurse's station. If we're talking an area where no care is given at that nurse's station, like under the desk where the computers are and that type of stuff, yeah, that could be a 1449 unless I have patient care vicinity within 6 feet of that.
no more information than just a regular nurse's station. So,
Right. Well, hopefully that will answer their question.
A follow up on the health department. She said a county health department is what she was speaking to. So, yeah, I think you're right about the occupancy there.
Right.
Okay, so somebody followed up on that. So how do we know what the number is for an extension cord if it's not in the package?
If I was in doubt, then I would not be using it.
Yeah.
That's pretty simple right there.
Okay, let's see. Here's another one. Can I plug non-PCRE equipment cell phone into a medical grade power strip within the patient care area?
And the answer to that is pretty simple. It's a no. The UL 606-01-1, the UL 1363A are both designed for PCRE only in that patient care area. Personal devices should be plugged directly into a receptacle. Some things to think about also when you guys are using these power strips. I mean, I know no one ever thinks to look at these kind of things, but I did a little checking on some different wattages and amperages, and I'll give you some examples. A coffee maker, and this also includes the little Keurig type setups because I checked those. We're talking an average of 9 amps. Some will draw more. You look at your television these days, we're talking 2.5 to 3 amps for the television, and a stereo 2.5 to 4, that type of stuff. And remember, a lot of this equipment draws amperage even when it's turned off, especially cable boxes, game systems, that type of stuff, televisions. They draw amperage whether they're in use or not. So if you've got a power strip in a room and you're powering the television set and maybe the cable box, a few other small devices, and someone comes in to do vacuuming on that room, I understand a vacuum cleaner can pull up to 11 amps. So if you put that onto that power strip, you're definitely exceeding that 75% if you have other items plugged into it. and maybe exceeding the total ampacity for it. So those are things to kind of look at.
Okay, we do have a few more questions here. What kind of documentation do I need to have and how often on power strips? That's what they're asking.
So every facility needs to have a policy on power strips. And then the policy needs to be gone over with employees, staff, residents, make sure that the policy is followed. You also should have a system in place where you're doing an assessment of your power strips, an annual assessment. You see where they have the annual requirement that you do an assessment on your retention and all that on your receptacles and that type of stuff. Well, you should also be doing an assessment on power strips to determine that the policy is being followed for one, that the power strip's still in usable condition, that type of stuff. So at least annually.
Okay, and we also have which power strips must be 6 feet away from bed, lift chair? Do all power strips have to be mounted to wall?
The power strips that have to be outside of the patient care area, that 6 foot, is your UL 1363. That's the only other power strip that can be in that resident room. Other than medical grade used for medical equipment. That's got to be 6 feet outside of that care area. It does not have to be attached to a wall, but it does. You want to make sure that it is not a tripping hazard and that it is not hanging by tension on any cord. So it's got to be either, it can be on the wall if you look on the back of the strip, there's a place where you can, a little mounting set up where you can actually hook it onto there. But you got to be able, you don't want to fix it to a wall by taping it or something like that. It's got to be something that can be taken off. And also it's got to be, you got to make sure that you're not straining any cords that are attached to it. So it can be sitting on the floor as long as it's not a tripping hazard and there's nothing pulling on the cords.
Okay, and somebody asked how often power strips need to be inspected. You address that yearly. That's what we're looking at there. With documentation, of course. Okay, can surge protectors or power strips be plugged into a battery backup or uninterrupted power supply?
Okay, battery backup uninterrupted power supply is kind of a different creature altogether. Some of those are designed, the APCs, where one side of them is intended to provide power in case of a power failure, and the other side is like a power strip. So you have to be very careful how that is used, because if you tied that onto the wrong side of that, then you are basically daisy chaining power strips. If you are plugging equipment directly into the battery backup side of that equipment, then it is your power strip or your battery backup, and that should be plugged directly to equipment. You wouldn't plug one of those into a power strip, because then you're not plugging the power strip directly into a receptacle, which is required.
Okay. This is someone else. We were replacing power strips with hospital grade 4-way mounted outlets. Are we still to do this? I'm not sure if he means, check your power strips or yearly or.
Well, if you're still using power strips, you still want to make sure that you are checking those power strips. Adding additional receptacles is that's a solution for if any situation where you need more power in that patient care vicinity, where they would have to, so that they can plug in items like cell phone chargers, tablet chargers, that type of stuff. So yeah, for personal equipment, if you're adding receptacles, okay. And you'll take care of that as far as your annual assessment of your receptacles. But if you're not using power strips, then you wouldn't need it. All you need is a policy saying power strips wouldn't be used. But if you're also using power strips, then you still need to make sure that you are assessing those annually.
Okay. And I think this goes to what you answered earlier, but do 1449 need to be mounted?
No, the 1449 can, as long as it's not a tripping hazard, again. The only power strip that is required to be mounted is a 1363A on portable equipment such as IV poles, crash carts, the nursing carts, that type of stuff.
Okay, and can single outlet surge protectors be used for equipment in a residence room?
A single outlet surge protector. You're talking about, if he's talking about what would plug into a receptacle, okay, a surge protector that plugs directly into a receptacle is no different than a power strip with no extension cord. Doesn't matter if it's one outlet or if it's 6 outlets. It would be the same as using a power strip. So you would not be able to daisy chain onto the end of that or add that onto the end of the other.
We have a question about the recording. Yes. We're going to get the recording out in a format that everybody can see it. And we'll get the slides to people who requested. And Ron Marshall had asked, yes, I will email you the slides as well so you get it out to anybody who wants it. And we also have another question. UL 6061-1 is the power strip that should be used for all medical equipment.
That should be used for medical equipment that can be connected to a medical grade power strip. Yes. So let's say I've got a CPAP machine or a monitor by my beds or something like that can be connected to a 60601-1. Do not connect large items such as oxygen concentrators, power lift beds, or power chairs to any of those type of those things. Those all need to be direct connected to a receptacle.
That's all the questions we have so far. If anybody has any more in there, if you'd like to receive the slides, just put your email in the chat. I will copy them. Also, I want to take this opportunity to remind you about our March session that we're going to have. That's going to be on Wednesday, March 16th. And Craig Shad with Keller's Fire Systems will be speaking about hood systems in commercial kitchens. So we'll put a notice out about that, and we'll put a reminder notice about that also.
Hey, I just came in a little bit late. Can you tell me which power strips then need to be put in patients' rooms at a nursing home?
Okay, so in a nursing home, any area that's within 6 feet of patient care vicinity,
Okay.
which would be considered their bed, lift chair, that type of stuff, that will be a 60601-1 for PCREE use only. So CPAP machines, blood pressure, that type of stuff. That's what those are used for. Oxygen concentrator needs to be plugged in direct. Beds need to be plugged in direct. Lift chairs need to be plugged direct. Okay.
Okay.
If they have portable equipment on stands or on carts, crash carts, the nurse med cart, IV poles, that type of stuff, that's a 1363A.
Okay.
And that's to be mounted to that cart or pole with a tool.
Okay.
Has to require a tool to be released. Outside of the patient care area is the 1363.
Right. Okay.
Those are your 3 options there.
Okay. We've got in several rooms, they have their phone, their power chair, their bed. Some do have oxygen. a few other things, lamps and things like that. They have plugged in a TV. So if I use the 6601, I just cannot plug in.
Those items you mentioned could
Yeah,
not be plugged into the 60601-1.
okay,
Personal items need to be, if they're within the patient care vicinity,
6 feet
they have to be plugged in direct to a receptacle.
directly to the receptacle.
Unfortunately, yes. If they're outside of the 6 foot of the care of the bed or that patient care area, you know, on the opposite wall, the TV and that stuff can be plugged into a 1363.
Okay,
Not
Okay.
use you can't use medical grade power strip to plug in personal items,
okay,
and you can't use non-medical grade within 6 feet of the bed, which is the patient care vicinity. So it kind of makes it a little tough, I understand, but in those situations, that's where you're going to need to add receptacles.
okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
You're quite welcome.
Couple of email addresses. I don't see any more questions right now. I don't know if anybody has anything else.
And if you do, you'll see on my screen here, this prevent.gov. You can send any questions you have to that email address. That is our central email where all questions come in. We also have code consultation form, which you can see the link to on here, and it's also on our website.
Yeah.
I'm just glad to know what Santa Claus does for the other 11 months of the year.
Yep, this is it. All
I
right,
think I'm-
John, well, if that's
Mostly
it,
slides, yeah. I think we covered everything, so. Thank you all for attending and hope you can make the March session. And thank you, Randy. There's a lot of good information there.
you're quite welcome.
Everybody be safe.
What?